And that brings me to one big question. Why has Western society, without any significant force, disintegrated so much in the last 50 years?
Oh, well.
I didn't think you'd have an opinion.
My goodness, why have we abdicated? Well, America has a mythology that is among the most naive of any nation, which is that it's never been betrayed by its government. Not in an overt way, the way, for example, Germany had a Nazi, a fascist state emerge. Other nations have had revolutions. They've had a changeover of governments. America's never had that. America's been very clever to have images of John Wayne and images of always America the good. And it has a mythology that everything that it does is for the best and for the good. And remember, we're the only nation ever that was consciously formed by a contract, a Declaration of Independence, a Bill of Rights, a Constitution, whose fundamental values are based upon the natural rights of the human spirit, where they said the fundamental values of human nature must come first. And so it was based upon a genuine high vision that just seemed to then become its sacred contract, and a form that says we have to do this for the benefit of humanity. I mean, during the American Revolution, as the soldiers were just about to march up Bunker Hill, and just prior to that, as they were gathering the first Revolutionary Army in this sort of makeshift, and everyone was rumbling about what to do about the British in Boston, Jefferson turned and said, and the king, and they were just like these upstarts. Jefferson turns and says, "Tell the king fear is not an American art." I mean, they just had such a power in them. We forgot that freedom needs to be managed, and it's somebody else's responsibility. And after Vietnam and the revolution of the 60s, after we got everything we wanted, but the revolution of the 60s was managed by intellectuals. These people were intellectuals. They said, this government's fallen the wrong way. It started a war with no reason, and we're being held to certain traditions that need to go. Once we got through that, not to pontificate, but once we got through that, and we got sexual freedom and religious freedom, and we got everything we wanted, all the hippies took off those garbs and became business people. And they made a bundle of money. And they stopped with and all of a sudden they thought, I like this situation. I like this government. I'm not going to be a hippie anymore. I'm going to get fat, and I'm going to get rich, and I'm going to buy me some big territory, and oops, now the computer era came. And now we got big, fat, and technical, and wealthy. And they raised children who were anti-American, because they couldn't distinguish the difference between being anti-government and still loyal to the principles of this nation. They could not distinguish the difference. And so the idea of still having a patriotic theme, still understanding the history of what this nation was about, got severed. And that was the beginning thread of how this nation began to fall apart. Money, and let me add, the Republicans were brilliant in that they realized that Americans are fundamentally a Christian nation. And that if they could capture that and make a kind of a deal, a covert marriage with the evangelicals, you can only have one a political party that's married to God, which means the other one has to be the godless party. And that's what they played on. The Republicans have God, the Democrats don't, and boom.
So how does it relate to healthcare?
Thank you.
But it does. But it does. It relates to healthcare in a great deal. I think through this there is a simultaneous culture. A simultaneous culture that is parallel, Carl, really. And that simultaneous culture was underneath this is a thought form that was emerging that says you create your own reality. A mystical renaissance, if you will, that is working within our culture simultaneously, that is part of the disintegration of this whole collective good old boy type of culture. And I mean that in the collective way, tribal way, and simultaneously is the world of holism, a new thought form that says the individual has to emerge as a more holistic, conscious being. In the world of the unconscious tribe, take care of everything, is the simultaneous emergence of the self. That was what that whole thought form that I have to, holistic medicine was born out of the whole. The idea that we're responsible for the environment came out of this. The idea that I don't have to be limited by the control forces of the tribe. That whole idea that I can choose what kind of relationship I want. That idea of a different type of choice was born out of the revolution of the 60s. That whole vision of revolution to evolution came out of the 60s. That whole notion of a different type of self, including the paradigm that my whole body is a holistic planet. My organs are no longer individual organs. They are no longer sovereign. If you treat me, if I come in and I say my heart is ill, and you say, this is a drug for your heart, but you know what? It's going to make your liver sick. My liver now has a voice that says, hold it, buddy. You can't do that. That is a micro of the macro of the planetary holism that says all of our nations remain individual, but they're no longer sovereign. That is an archetypal model that was dropped in the 60s that is reshaping us and reshaping us as individuals, both at the level of health, whether it's the health of the model of the body, mind, spirit trinity, or the model of how we see the health of our environment, the model of how we see the health of the manner in which we conduct everything. It is an entire world paradigm that was reborn out of this.
Now, on the other hand, it's a great concept, wonderful philosophy, and yet less than 3% of Americans at this point in time have the 4 basic health habits. Less than 3%. Only 10% get adequate physical exercise. 2/3 are sloppy in every aspect of their life. So there is a consciousness that is being born still over this last 40 years, but it hasn't reached the general population yet.
Yeah, but Norm, there is nowhere along the line
that it ever has.
That any higher truth has grabbed the full population of anything, honey.
I know.
Whether it's a higher truth spiritually, or a higher truth physically, or a higher truth in terms of hygiene, it's never grabbed everybody, because it's about power, and very few people want to ascend to the full management of their power, because that is about responsibility.
You know, right in line with this, my second son is a Presbyterian minister, and he called me the other day, and his sermon had to do with power versus freedom. And what he had come up with was that power, the very aspect of power, is control over others. Freedom comes when you take power over yourself. And the only real freedom happens as we take that control back. Then we're free to be in the positions that we need to be in. So that the power and freedom become what I personally accept for my responsibility in this world.